Good afternoon, everybody, and this is Food for Thought, and this is Debs. How are you all? Hopefully you're all really well. I think Adrian Hicks there has more or less said it all for me today, maybe. Who knows? Anyway, I've got a fantastic guest on today with, how long have I known you, Dean? A long, long time. But my guest is a founder of Team Warrior. He owns Warrior Coaching. And he's an amazing coach, and I have known him for a number of years. And if I need inspiring, this is who I go to. If I need my clients inspiring, and I've taken them as far as I can take them, he is who I send them to. So, Dean, hello.
Wow, thank you very much. Thanks. Hi.
And what did you think about the Rampage of Invincibility by Adrian Hicks?
Well, that's some very powerful messages in it, and it resonates quite a lot with some of the sort of coaching models that I developed. And it basically opens up the whole wide web of questions of just how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go, because depending on what level you're at and sort of your experience of exploring these kind of subjects, it will resonate on different levels. And I find that quite often when people are new to it and they sort of explore it for the first time, it probably appears a bit misleading at first. The thought that you can just create whatever you want. It kind of sounds a little bit too much, sounds a little bit like, well, it doesn't make sense, sounds a little bit like, and then they get the other side of the coin, people go, yep, I believe it, and they kind of rush into it, and then they don't get the results that they want from it. So it is a very deep subject, I think, and some things that some people don't take deep enough, and maybe initially they take it a bit too lightly.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I know, if you lead yourself through that, that she talks, and it's all channeled. For those people who don't know about Abraham Hicks, effectively, it's Jerry and Esther Hicks who effectively, or it was, because one of them's died, hasn't there? They channel Abraham, and effectively he has just been the most amazing source of inspiration and motivation for hundreds of people, thousands of people. I think now they influence, and they write a number of books. But as she leads you through that, the power, you didn't even need the music behind it. Someone's put that music behind it, but she talks about the contrast that surrounds you, the inspiring of new ideas and the birthing of new ideas. And I really do think we're at a time when actually people are kind of at a crossroads, or is it a fork in the roads, where some people are truly almost birthing a new person. What do you think about that at the moment, Dean?
Well, I've always kind of come to the thought process of infinite knowledge. So I've always thought that all the knowledge and the creativity is already out there, and that we don't so much create it from scratch and brand new, but we just tap into it. And I do think there's a shift going on where people are changing their thought processes, and they're starting to tap into this energy, and they're starting to open up to it. Because, as you say, the energy, well, it never went away. It's not arrived. It wasn't. It was always been there. But I think it's taken a shift for people to start opening up to it and accepting it. And I think there's a paradigm shift happening where people are opening up to it, and it's becoming more and more acceptable to talk about these topics.
Yeah, I agree. All of a sudden, I'm more acceptable. Previously, I was seen as being a little bit mad, but and I do think that was the case with many things. With many of us, it's the energy that I'm suddenly seeing. It's almost like flooding into people, and people I see two types of people. I see people who are taking it on board and starting to grow and experience the change, and then I kind of see the people who are still very engulfed and overwhelmed by what our society has created, and is still very dulled by it, and aren't really experiencing it at all.
Well, yeah, absolutely. If you don't understand it, then the energy kind of ebbs and flows, and you kind of just mislead it as just for circadian rhythms, and you think it's just the part of the ebb and flow of life, and it kind of comes and goes, and you don't notice it come and go, so to speak. But yeah, I do think people are starting to become more aware of it, and it is that awareness which is how we're going to be able to use the energy, because without the awareness, it's going to be wasted energy in a lot of people.
How are you seeing this awareness around you?
How am I seeing it?
Yeah. How are you seeing it manifest around you with people, and what you're doing and things like that?
Well, I see it, I suppose, like, for a lot of it, it doesn't seem that new to me, because I've been kind of seeing it for a while, and I've always had the philosophy based on Eastern philosophy, how, like, first you sort of work with the body, then you work with the mind, then you work with the spirit. And I think if you sort of follow that process, then it kind of all sort of makes sense. But a lot of people out there, they're not doing the basics. Then they're not thinking about their body and that kind of thing. So that when all this energy comes, it is very overwhelming and very overpowering. So what do I mean by that? I suppose if I break it down to a very simple analogy, just look at the martial arts. They teach you the moves, which is a very physical thing. And then when you get to a certain level of that, they teach you the mental side of it and the meditation and how the whole thing has to be connected to really sort of master the art. And then obviously once you've mastered that part, then you transcend it and it becomes a very spiritual process, in which case, a lot of the combat skills are irrelevant because it kind of goes beyond that and transcends it. Now, if I bring that back into sort of people's everyday lives, and as well from, your work with nutrition, if people are not thinking about their body from a point of view of how they move it, how they utilize it, what they put in it, how they manage their energy on a purely physical basis, then when it comes to sort of developing the mindset and using the spiritual energy, then people have thought that it is very overwhelming. People are not going to manage it effectively.
It's interesting that you've, the philosophy of working on mind, body, then spirit, and, and moving into kind of the meditation and all the mental side of things, because, like you say, I work predominantly with nutrition and cleansing, first of all, but I have learnt myself that actually the meditation and the mental side is a high proportion of what you have to do. And years ago, I think I've said this before, but my naturopath used to say to me, when I used to go and see her to be patched up, she'd say to me, are you meditating? Are you taking any time out for yourself? I'd say, I haven't got even time to breathe. Just patch me up and get me back out there. But one of the biggest things I do now is I actually take time to meditate. It has opened up areas in my life that I never thought I would experience.
Well, it makes perfect sense, because I often think of meditation and some of these mental practices as a bit like personal training. Like we expect to sort of like, now we know we're empowered and aware that our thoughts create reality. We think, right, let's go and do it. But the truth is, it's a relatively big feat for a newbie. So I liken it very much to going into the gym and saying, I'm going to bench press 100 kilos. Now, on the first day, you might just about be able to lift the bar up and think, oh, I'm miles away. But, with a program and a step-by-step process and regular practice, it's actually not that big a feat. It sounds very impressive. It's really not that difficult to do. And quite often it's the same with the mind. Now, the first day, someone will do a bit of a meditation and, to be honest, you start twitching and fidgeting and you don't really get much quality done. And then you think, well, do you know what? It was a bit pants, but I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to do my 10-minute slots, and then it develops into 15 minutes, then the intensity and the concentration increases. Then after a period of time, you find you're actually quite good at it, and it's starting to manifest. And even when it starts to manifest, you're still only tipping the iceberg with the power of it, Now, what we generally find with people is they go, right, well, I'll give it a go for 4 weeks, and I'll see what happens. And if you liken that to a gym program of someone saying, well, I'll go for 4 weeks and see what happens, the likelihood is not a lot will. And then obviously people have made their sort of basis on, well, I gave it a go and it's rubbish. And that's kind of why personally I stick to the master of the body, master of the mind, master of the spirit. And the reason I do that is because there's certain attributes and skills that you develop by mastering the body, which you can take to the mind. Because if you look at the body, it's a relatively small playground compared to the mind. And the mind is a much more expansive playground, and there's so much more. So if you can't master that small playground, you've got no chance going out into the big field. And then if you sort of are struggling in that big field and you sort of start working on spirituality and energy, you're just going to get lost in the ether, So for me, it's just about the very simple fundamentals of like working with the body. You learn things like routine, discipline, determination, and sticking with it. And we talk a lot about resilience and the resilience to keep going with the program. As long as you know you're on the right path, you can start to develop that resilience. The main factor where resilience fails is where you start to question the path you're on. And then, of course, it's quite easy to fold and take a new route. So yeah, you develop these skills to master the body, then you take that to the mind, and then you've already got a bit of perseverance. You've already got a bit of, stamina. You've already got a bit of, the ability to hang in there when the practice don't seem to give you the results you want. And then you can start developing it and so forth. Which is why, like I said, that piece earlier is very powerful. But for a lot of people, it may go straight over their heads, because if they've never sort of done the basics of learning to sort of stick to something, and again, you can't do it on a talking level. You have to go through the actions and experience it and do it. You know, you can explain to someone that, did you know that if you did this program for 12 months, you'd feel fantastic? They go, yeah, I get it. But if they don't do it, you know, they don't really understand what it means. Even though intellectually they totally understand it, you know, but until you've experienced it, which is why, you know, I heard a guy called Roger Hamilton once who said, to know and not to do is not yet to know. And I liked it so much, it's become one of my mantras. And to be honest, I pick myself up on it a lot, you know, because I'm not a perfect person, and quite often I catch myself going, yeah, I know that. And then I think, but Dean, do you know it? You know, do you do it? Do you practice it? And if you do it and you practice it, you live it, then you can say without doubt that you know it. But we do live in a culture where people know a lot of things but haven't done anything. And I think that's why this information initially is quite a big mountain to tackle. And I think as we start to get our awareness of this, and I think people are committing to things a lot more, and, you know, and they start to think, you know what, I'm going to give this a go and I'm going to practice it. And we're still on the very tipping point of that paradigm, I think, and that shift. But I do think it's happening. I think people are starting to buy into it, and they think, you know what, I'm going to give this some of my attention, and I'm going to give it a go.
That's really interesting. You've got loads of points there for me to kind of pick up on. You know, I love what you say about the body is a small playground in comparison to the mind. You know, they think they know the mind. They know very little about the mind. Science in many respects, and they know very little about the body in many respects as well, apart from kind of the actual chemical and functions at times. But I had an interview this week with a friend who runs a membership site, and they were basically talking to me about all of that aspect around how we really do not know, you know, half of what is going on in our mind, and the control that we can have. And we were, you know, I'd spoken about the fact that I'd got in touch with, I started to make real connections with people's energy and energy fields, and I could experience them by, you know, just running my hands fairly close to an individual. I'm not at the point where I can see that energy field yet, but I am at a point where I can experience it through my own sort of my hands and things like this. And I was talking about how I was energetically getting in touch with the food I was foraging for, and how energetically different that food is to the foods that you tend to be, you know, buying from the supermarket. And they asked me how I could get their listeners to actually understand that in a bit more detail, and what their listeners could do. And I had to bring it back to your point, which is that you've got to be able to manage your body first. You have to experience the shifts within yourself first before you can even start to experience those shifts in other people's energy fields. And, you know, I've been working very, very hard to actually experience those shifts. And, you know, I use things like emotional freedom technique, which give you, you know, a really nice way of experiencing a shift and shifting in your behaviour quite quickly, and other sort of energy therapies. And it's only from actually that experience for myself can I now actually almost push that back onto somebody else and start to experience it through someone else. So that's been really interesting for me. Just coming back to your point about perseverance and determination and, you know, your resilience aspect of things. I was listening to a lady this week who's a 75-year-old bodybuilder. I think she's slightly older now, called Ernestine. I can't remember her second name, in all honesty, but she blew me away. She'd only started bodybuilding about 5 years ago. And she was saying, you know, she had a fantastic body. She did not look 75 by any stretch of the imagination. And that just really brought it home to me. That actually, and she was saying, you know, she had perseverance, she was determined to achieve what she set out to achieve, and she knew what she wanted.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the action is what defines us at the end of the day, which is why, you know, like, intellectually understanding something, you can only get so far with it.
Yeah.
When we look at like recent times, through the 90s and the noughties, we saw like a big surge of like coaching and NLP practitioners, you know, because they touched on something which was very powerful, and they kind of ran with it. And we're almost at a stage where we've got to take a step back, because what it kind of, in my view, it kind of bred a lot of people who started to skip the body and go straight to the mind. Mm. And they go, do you know what? If I use my mindset, I can do this. And I've seen the secret. I know how powerful my mind is. So if I sit here and meditate, I can do this. And, you know, if I think about it enough and just make enough vision boards, I could do this. If the affirmations are right and I say it regularly, I can do this. And everyone was kind of trying to skip the basics. And I kind of liken it to, when you go to a college and there's a course and you've got the beginners class, the intermediates and the experts. Now, for some reason, you know, no one ever believes that they are average. So the beginner class couldn't possibly apply to us, you know, and everyone just jumps straight into intermediate. But I think the fundamentals of everything is very basic, and we're all looking for that killer tip, that killer distinction, you know, that one thing that's going to change everything. But everything that's very successful comes around to some very key basics done very well. And I think for all of us, it's just about, you know, making sure that we are doing the basics, making sure we are committing to simple things, you know, because I catch myself making these mistakes, you know, and I'm always doing it and always having to bring myself back. But luckily, I've got the awareness to say, right, this, Dean, is where you need to come back to the basics. You know, you're trying to complicate it, you're trying to get ahead of yourself, you know. It's a great place to try and be and to work towards, but if you get there too soon, then you're not doing anything productive. You just think you are, you know.
It's interesting about you coming back to the basics, because I've become very committed, particularly with my clients, about getting those foundations in place. And often, and everybody knows who listens to this show and the podcast regularly, that I go on and on and on about water and the aspects that just follow that, the simple foundation things that need to be in place for you to have good cellular health. And yet, you know, people will want to run forward and they'll contact me back about the fantastic supplements and the foods that they're taking and all this sort of thing. And I'm like, well, you know what? We need to get those basics in place. We need to get the discipline and the lifestyle in place so that you are living it habitually on a day-by-day basis, because only then can you truly springboard forward. So I'm very committed to those basics. And what do you think also about, I feel that, you know, part of my own learning and development around this whole area and my own commitment is, one, being a role model and actually applying it on a daily basis to myself, but also educating others in those. And so being very clear about what I'm educating people, that I'm only educating people on things that I actually do on a day-to-day basis myself.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of my favourite stories was, well, it was told of Gandhi. Whether it was Gandhi, I don't know. But the story goes that a mother brings the child to Gandhi and says, Gandhi, can you tell my son to stop eating sugar? And Gandhi says, yes, sure, bring him back in 2 weeks. So the mother does exactly that, brings him back in 2 weeks and says, Gandhi, I spoke to you 2 weeks ago about my son eating sugar and you said bring him back. So would you be able to now tell him to stop eating sugar? And Gandhi says, yeah, sure thing. You know, son, stop eating sugar. And that's kind of the end of the visit. And the mother obviously looks a bit confused at why it took 2 weeks for that to happen when she was there 2 weeks ago. So she asked Gandhi the obvious questions, like, well, why didn't you do this 2 weeks ago? And Gandhi says, well, 2 weeks ago I was eating sugar. You know, and it's so simple but so powerful, you know. And I think one of the sort of quotes that came out of it was, practice what you preach and preach only what you've embodied in yourself. Now, I'm not going to lie, like, there's times in my past when I sort of first got on the coaching bandwagon and I got into it myself and I was very inspired by it, that I probably was sharing stuff that I hadn't totally embodied. You know, and looking back, I can see that and I can recognize it, you know, and I can see where the flaws were in that. But I think what people need these days, people need these role models now, because there's a lot of people out there sharing information. There's a lot of people out there telling people how to live their life and what to do and what the answer is. But when you actually sort of look at their lives, you're thinking, you know, there's flaws in it. So obviously all the students are looking around thinking, well, either this person's a con artist and everything they're saying is untrue, or they're just not taking their own medicine. Now, for a long period of time, I think there's been a huge part of the population that went to the former and basically thought that a lot of what we were saying around these subjects just simply wasn't true. Because really, you know, if we're going to be very honest about it, there's not that many quality role models out there, you know. And it seems to be that the ones who in the past have been very successful at it really are amazing at sales and marketing. So you've got a sales and marketing guru telling you, how to live your life. But the truth is that they're not really interested in how you live your life. They're just interested in the sales and marketing and the fact that enough people want to find out about how to live your life that they're going to pay them for it. So therefore, again, people have flocked to the wrong role models. Don't get me wrong, there are some good role models out there, but it's been difficult for the general sort of population to decipher who the right person is and who the wrong person is. And I think the way that that they will see it is just pure integrity, and by going to the people who do what they say. Like if someone says drink water, then, look for someone who actually drinks water, and you see them carrying their water around, It sounds very sort of childish and simple, but that's kind of what it is.
Go on, sorry.
No, I was going to say it is that basic, because again, we're all looking for the complicated answer. Like, to an extent, there is that side of the coin where how deep down the rabbit hole do you want to go, and the subjects can get very, very expansive very quick, and you can blow people's minds with what's going on. But the fundamentals at the start it is very simple,
I think you're very right about associations and who you actually go to for your information. And it's horses for courses to a certain extent. People will resonate with you at different times, and I believe that you kind of get on somebody's bus for a period of time and then you get off because actually they don't resonate with you anymore, or they've kind of taken you as far as they can take you. And but I think associations and who you surround yourself with is incredibly important, and I'm very selective now. I don't know about yourself, but I make sure that everybody who is in support of me and I have to use as a resource for my business, I have to use as a resource to, for my clients, matters. And I will remove people from that equation if I think that they are not moving me positively forward.
I 100% agree, to be fair. And again, I can look back in my life at periods where I was around the wrong people and I was just leaking energy at a rate of knots. Like, I suppose if you look at it very simply, is everyone's an energetic being, and whenever two people interact, there's an energetic reaction. So if someone's busy sort of developing themselves, cultivating their energy, building their energy, working on their energy, and they bump into someone with low energy, then you've only got to look at the basic laws of science and osmosis. Some of your positivity and, abundance is going to filter onto that person. So as you walk away, you're going to end up feeling weaker. And that's kind of basically what happens. Like, I remember speaking to a therapist when I was at university, and she'd studied this therapy degree, and the long and the short of it was all of the therapists were in therapy because they'd kind of come to the conclusion that they'd spent so long picking up their clients that they'd lost all of their energy. And it was basically down to this energy exchange where they went in all positive. The client was obviously at rock bottom, and that's why they were requiring the therapy. The client would walk out feeling rejuvenated, thinking, fantastic, can't wait for next week. And now the therapist was in therapy. And that's obviously an extreme case. It's quite almost a comical way of sharing the story. But as soon as you go to the supermarket and you make an exchange at the till, there's an energetic reaction taking place. And all these little energetic reactions add up. Now, to an extent, you have to be resilient and you have to sort of live in the real world and you have to get by. But when you, for instance, have a 9-to-5 job and that person next to you just constantly drains you 40 hours a week on a regular basis, it starts to become quite a challenge to manage your energy. And I think that's what a lot of people are experiencing now. People who are maybe not aware of where their energy is coming and where it's going, that they're in these sort of ruts and these sort of energy pits where their energy is being evaporated all the time, but they just don't realise it. And it's quite often to do with, family members who are telling them to be realistic or be safe, and sort of, culling their sort of energy. When they start getting excited about things, they might like rein them in a bit, thinking it's for their protection, but what they're actually doing is killing some of their energy. And then they'll go to work, and again, they'll be put in place by maybe some middle managers are keeping them under close scrutiny. Their colleagues are sort of down and not very excited about their jobs. Maybe they all want to move on, but they can't move on because it's just not that easy. And the negativity of that just cycles around. And I've seen it on a regular basis where people come to me, and they say, Dean, I want to change. And I said, okay, let's change then, but I can't, I can't. And it's because, as quick as they try and cultivate a bit of energy, they go into their life and it'll be their friends, their family, their work colleagues are just draining it out of them. And it's a bit of a cliche, but you often sort of, when you read a lot of the self-help books, I call them, the self-help books, but it does say that, when you start to develop to a certain level, your circle of friends changes, because the ones who don't want to accept the new you get left behind, and you start to seek out people who are a bit more, on your energetic wavelength, because you just can't live by going into these groups and just constantly feeling like you're having the life sucked out of you.
It's interesting what you say, because this week I had that very experience that I was in a meeting and somebody sat next to me who was feeling a bit low, and they weren't feeling that great in general, and they turned around to me and they said, just sitting next to you has made me feel better. And the first thing that went through my mind was, oh gosh, what's that done to my energy levels? So I was then busy protecting myself, because I thought, oh, has that been a bit of a drain on me? Because you're absolutely right. Therapists, they do, they're so focused on giving everything to their clients. They do very little outside of that to actually protect themselves, to bring their own energy back up again, and to make sure that actually they're not permanently drained from it. And it is quite difficult to do. I have come away from clients where I've not expected to have the drain that I've had, and then I've been knocked out for 3 or 4 days because of it. Sometimes you just do not expect it. But, I think the environments, you're talking about people around you. Environments are massively draining. I will go back to my HR life, which just seems so long ago now. That seemed, all the performance management and all the culture just seemed massively draining on my energy, on my focus, on where, it never really built me up as an individual. It was all about the collective, and I just saw my energy permanently be draining away for the benefit of other people and profiteering, which, we never really benefited from in the end. And I see that associations now are incredibly important for bringing my happiness. I create my happiness. We go back to the beginning, we are creators, and I create that, but those people around me matter now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up quite an interesting point about the environments and the buildings. I'm a firm believer that your energetic sort of imprint leaves an imprint on where you've been as well. So certain buildings, like I've experienced, you just literally walk in the building and you can feel a different energy. If I go back, like not a million years ago, I was working as a duty manager in a leisure facility, and if I'd literally go in to work and I'd just cross that threshold into the building and I could feel the negative energy. It was in the building where so many people within that structure had a certain kind of experience that it become an imprint on the building. Now another thing, I'm not a religious person in that fashion, but if you walk into a church, because of, the sermons and all the activities that happen in the church, you can't go in one without experiencing the shift in energy. If that makes sense. And whether you resonate with energy, whether you don't resonate with that energy, like it's there and it's having a direct impact on you as a person. Like people seem to think, well, if I intellectually don't have to think about it, well, you can't, like, because everything's on an energetic level, that you got to do a lot more than that to protect your energy than just like change the subject. It's happening on a much deeper level,
Yeah, I remember listening to an interview by Gerald Pollack, and I've talked about this before as well. And his work shows that the infrared that we give off as individuals, that we absorb from the sun rays effectively, and that it's putting, everything absorbs it. So your buildings absorb it, we absorb it. It impacts on the molecular structure of the water. So in effect, every interaction that we have, actually, there is scientific basis that shows that the infrared is restructuring your molecular structure. And you just think, oh my God, I am 75% water approximately, depending on which day it is and how much I've done and how hot it is and how stressed I am. But actually, the majority of my body is water, and just by interacting with somebody else or a building, they are changing my molecular structure of the water. That's just astonishing to me.
Well, absolutely. Well, I suppose the way to think about it is everyone's got an energetic field, and the energetic field contracts and expands. So the way I always think about it, like when I was little, I used to play Sonic the Hedgehog, and like you know when you get your invincibility shield, there's that bubble around you. Yeah. It's a bit childlike, but I think of my little bubble like that. But basically, that bubble is contracting and expanding constantly, and it can actually expand to the size of the universe, and it can contract to within yourself. Now, wherever it is at the point of contracting and expanding, whatever comes within that energetic field is affecting you, and you are affecting it. Now, if you look at, say, extrovert and introverted people are very much affected by their external circumstances because the very stereotypical extrovert, I know there's obviously a lot of different ranges of extrovert, but the very stereotypical extrovert is very out there, very in your face. By nature, they throw their energetic field out because, their personality dictates that they're kind of affected by the external environment, which is why they're so affected by it, because they've thrown their energetic field out there, and then everything's within that field. And if you look at an introverted person who thinks, well, I'm not really affected by the people around me, it may be that they've actually retracted their energetic field to within them. So if they brush past someone, it won't affect them because their energetic field's not outside of themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And everyone's obviously constantly changing. Everyone's had that experience where they've kind of been in a busy place and they've retracted within themselves and they felt like no one knew they were there. And the point is, because they weren't energetically interacting with anyone, in a weird way, people probably didn't even know they were there, probably didn't notice them. And then everyone has also been in a room where someone's just come in and everyone's just turned around to look at the door because they've just felt a presence. And the door might be 40 or 50 yards away from where you stood, but you just knew someone was in the room. And it's because they've come in and they've projected the energetic field before they came in.
No, that's really fascinating because I have a friend who has been talking about somebody else who is part of a group, and as this person enters the room, she always absolutely commands the room, and the attention is always totally on this individual. And my friend was completely astonished by this and was quite thrown by how this individual could do this. But you're absolutely right in regards to you can manage the energetic field around you and how it's going to influence other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of people are unaware that it's happening, so people are like, oh, I'm an extrovert, and obviously it's taking place. And other people just think, well, I'm an introvert, and they won't be aware of why or how this energetic things are happening. Now, the danger of being an extrovert and not being aware of it is that every single thing within your field is affecting you and you're affecting it. Now, in the majority of cases where people who are not managing it, or not aware of how to manage it, it's affecting them a lot more than they realise that they're affecting others. Because they are affecting others, but obviously they're only aware of their own personal situation. And they probably find at the end of the day they're quite heavily drained, which is why you get a lot of like the stereotypical sort of star who by day is the glowing, glitzy, glamorous individual, and then by night they're just like a hollow person thinking, where's my life gone? It's a very sort of exaggerated, stereotypical story, but most people can relate to someone who, out in public is very sort of amazing, very good, got great energy, but then they seem to sort of almost fade in the evening and like wonder where their energy's gone. And it's because they're kind of so busy throwing it out there and it's unmanaged that they're very much affected by their environment. So yeah, I strongly believe that the energetic connections and if we're aware of who we're connecting with, the circles we're moving in, the places we're going, I think that has a very profound effect on our lives. If we're just kind of rolling with it and going where we expect it to go, for instance, if you're in a confined space like on the London Underground, there's an element of, well, how much control have you got of the people you're connecting with? To an element, you could be connecting with anyone. How deep down the rabbit hole do you want to go? You could say that you're attracting different people into your life at those times, but then that's a whole different subject, of how powerful like your energetic field is and your attraction is. But again, if you look at it on a very crude basis, someone who's not really aware of it, not really thinking about it and not really focusing on it, they're kind of being controlled by what's happening around them more than changing what's around them to fit in with, what's inside them, if that makes sense. Well,
it's that whole lack of control. It's that feeling that from the moment, well, that you've lost control, that you have no control over anything, where actually you have control over the majority of things in your life because you've made a decision to put yourself in that situation. So fundamentally, you can always track it back, can't you?
Well, absolutely. I read a study once. I've always tried to find it again since, because I've wanted to reference it and I can't find it again. But I read a study once about, I believe it was 70 monks in 70 different states across America. Mm-hmm. And they did a 48-hour meditation exercise where they put them in a place of worship in each of the 70 sort of towns or villages or whatever the community was. Mm-hmm. And they meditated in that place of worship for 48 hours. Then afterwards, they ran the numbers. And for that 48-hour period, in each location they were in, there was zero crime for the entire 48 hours.
Yeah, the crime dropped. Yeah.
You know, now, obviously, when you sort of look at the monks and the fact that they take this as a life's work and they're so dedicated to it, they understand that what they're throwing out there has affected everyone within that vicinity. Mm. Now, most of the people in the vicinity didn't even know the monks were doing it. And if you asked them, they'd have said, I don't believe it. Mm. But the truth is they did affect it, and there was zero crime over a 48-hour period, which is a considerable period, in 70 different locations. Now, I'm still looking for that. I'd love to reference it again. So I'm going to keep trying to find it. But when I read that just kind of blew my mind at the power.
Well, the thing is that fundamentally we can influence everything because of that, can't we? I mean, you know, if that's the case, you know, and I have read that piece of research. I think I might be able to forward it you, Dean.
Oh, okay.
I probably have got it somewhere, knowing me. but then, you know, that the whole crux of that goes back to my earlier sort of point of, you know, practicing your art, developing your art. Because another side of the coin as well, I know when they did a meditation exercise, they got a monk to meditate and they did a scan of the brain. Yeah. And I can't remember which part of the brain. I think it's the prefrontal part of the brain. And it basically the whole thing was blocked out as you know, and gave an image on the scan. Whereas they got someone who'd been meditating for a few years to do exactly the same thing, and only a tiny part of that brain sort of lit up. So this other person obviously believed themselves, you know, to be practiced at meditation, you know, and dedicated to it, committed to it. But it just sort of, on a graphical level, just showed the difference of, you know, this monk's brain just completely lit up, and this person was only using a very, very tiny part of their brain. And this is where the discipline of the regular practice, you know, maintaining your sort of program and that sort of thing comes into place. Because if you're not keeping up on a regular basis, then you do have a relatively small control over your mind. You know, and then when you come to call on it, you know, it's quite easy to say, it doesn't work, when the truth is you haven't developed it to a level where you're using it. It's really interesting about small control over the mind, because, you know, the research shows they don't know hardly anything about the mind in many respects. And, you know, our ability to take in information from our, you know, just our peripheral sight and our senses is huge. And, you know, the research that I've been reading is that at a cellular level, we're often not taking in information via our eyes as we think we are, but we're taking it in at a cellular level because our bodies are making decisions far, far faster than our brains would actually be doing it. And effectively, it's our brain that's kind of marshalling it into action, but it's our cells that are actually receiving fundamentally that information.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you've only got to look at the sort of things flicking around social media, you know, when someone puts up a photograph and say, did you see it? And they say, look again, you know, and these little sort of photographs show you just how quick your mind tricks you when you look at something, you know, or it'll have some weird, graphics, and then you'll be able to read it and there's no letters on the page. You know, and it highlights just how quickly your mind interprets what it wants to interpret. And the kind of figures that I've read in research is that I think 10% of what you see is actually your vision. The rest is sort of like your brain and your mind filling the dots in. Again, I don't know how they come up with that 10%, so I don't know how accurate it is. But it does sort of give food for thought, you know, about the fact that how much of your vision is actually pure vision, you know, and how much is, you know, perception really, and that's the key bit, is perception of what you think you see.
That's the whole filtering system, though, isn't it? And that comes about because of, let's bring it back to what we were talking about originally, which is that, that whole experiential part of life. You're working your way through life, and your experiences then add to your, they give you the filtering system in regards to how you're going to perceive and see things, and how you're then going to act on them.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I love my little stories of the two Buddhist monks, but there was two Buddhist monks walking through a forest, and one says to the other, what a beautiful sunny day. The birds are in the trees singing. The sun's out. Absolutely glorious. And the other Buddhist says, all I saw was all that litter on the ground, and I can't believe people don't big up their dog poo after they've had a walk. Now, there's two Buddhists in exactly the same environment, and they've both seen completely different things, yet all along the same things were there.
Yeah.
And I think that's basically the point that you were trying to make about the fact that the information's always there, and it's just down to our perception and awareness of what we see. And ultimately that's what a lot of the earlier topic that you played at the start is about. Manifesting the things that we want into our lives, quite often they were already there. We've just got to learn to see them.
Yeah.
So it isn't about anything sort of dramatic. I think some people sort of listen to that and think, oh, what? So if I just imagine it, a Porsche fall out the sky, that's not actually what it's saying. What it's saying is you just want to sort of focus your mind to see what's actually at the end of your nose.
Do you think that we're prevented from doing that now, though, by the overwhelm of information and we're bombarded by information via emails, on the internet, on the television, via the cinema? We're just bombarded with often conflicting information. So go on then.
Well, knowing the discussions we've had, and obviously your, expertise in nutrition, you've often talked about the fact that when the body's bombarded with, food and crap, basically, it can't decipher what it wants, and it can't decipher where it's at, and it's exactly the same with the mind. If you keep bombarding the mind, then it doesn't get a chance to think, it doesn't get a chance to work out what's what, and it doesn't get a chance to actually understand what it needs. One of the things we talked about, I've heard you mention with the body is when the body's, pure and cleansed, it naturally craves what it naturally needs. But if it's full of crap, you don't get those messages from the body. And the mind's exactly the same. For some reason, and I'm experiencing it on a day-to-day basis because I'm a married man. My wife's about to give birth to our second child. And, and she thinks a little bit different to me on these things, so if I get 5 minutes, I think fantastic. That's 5 minutes where I could, relax, breathe, and, she's thinking very differently. She's thinking 5 minutes, blimey, I've got so much to do. I can chip a few things off the list. And everyone knows someone like that. When they get a free hour, it's not a free hour anymore because, fantastic, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, I can do that. And an example of that would be when our first child was born, didn't sleep at night, often slept in the daytime. So me being me was if the kid's asleep, I'll have a sleep. because you need to sleep, don't you? Yeah. Whereas my wife was no. Now the baby's finally asleep, I can get some stuff done. And the point I'm kind of trying to make is that people just fill their time constantly. It's a bit like that cupboard. You put an extra shelf in and suddenly it's full up. You haven't got any extra space. People just constantly fill their time. And if we look at time management courses, leadership courses, everyone's learning time management skills. But what they forget once they've learned these time management skills is that it doesn't mean they just have to fill it out with more crap.
Yeah.
But people sort of master their time so they can fit more in. Mm. And I think that's a problem that we're all sort of bombarded by. Part of it is the culture, and if we're not aware of it, not thinking about it, then it's kind of almost enforced upon us, because you get in your car, the radio's bombarding you with messages, there's stuff going, there's billboards, and your mind's bombarded with stuff on a 10-minute journey to work. Though we may not always realise just how much it's bombarded with information. And then we get to work and, the boss doesn't sit there letting you think about what to do. You're being told what to do. You're being directed. You're being pushed. You're being shoved. And if you've got an hour, it's an hour. It's got to do this. It's got to do that. You've got to do that. You've got to do this. Then you finally get to your lunch break and oh, right, now you've got to do something for yourself because you know that when you get home you won't have any free time. So you quickly run into the post office to send you're making a call to the insurance to get your car insurance done. And all of a sudden you haven't got a lunch break anymore. And people do live like this on a day-to-day basis where they wake up in the morning and go to bed at night, and the bit in the middle was just a complete stream of activity, but they didn't get 1 second to just think what they were thinking, which is why meditation is so powerful. I would probably hazard a guess that a very, very, very high percentage of people, if we was to say practice 10 minutes meditation every day, I would say more than 50% of the population would struggle to find out where they get that 10 minutes from. And I think that highlights the problem. Yeah. Where people think, well, it's easy for you to say 10 minutes, but where the heck am I going to get 10 minutes from?
The interesting thing for me is that as I've simplified my life down and removed lots of aspects of it, I've found that I'm more productive and I get far more done in smaller periods of time, which has meant that I've got far more time to spend the time doing the things that I want to do, which is spending time with friends. That's been a real revelation to me, in all honesty. And the meditation, and Tom Evans talks about this, he's an author. He basically talks about the fact that you get almost double the time back that you spend meditating. And I would never have believed that originally. But the more I've extricated myself from things like the television, from listening to people who are, I don't think are feeding my life, from books and all the different aspects that go on in this world that are just adding to our stress and the need and things that drive our behaviours to want more, the more I've extricated myself from that, the more I've had the time to actually do the things that I want to do. And that's been a complete revelation to me.
Well, absolutely, and going back to doing what you want to do, at least now you're probably more aware of what you want to do. There's a lot of people out there who go, I don't never get what I want. And then you ask them the simple question, what do you want?
Yeah.
And the likelihood is they don't know because they've never had 5 minutes to actually think about it. They're so busy rushing around and drifting that 10 years goes in a flash, and they never actually thought, well, actually, what do I want? Well, if they'd had 5 minutes themselves, maybe they would have asked the question. But, quite often they never get round to that.
It's fascinating. Yesterday, I spent a lot of my day walking with a couple of friends at different times of the day with two different friends. And I got up early and I really focused on the thing that I wanted to achieve yesterday. And I finished it way before I thought I would, which gave me the time to then think about what I want to do and actually where I want that day to head. And I live far more in the now as well. That's something else where people are almost doing. And, they're very productive in many respects. But actually, I think you're right. There's no real understanding about why they're doing it or what they're aiming for with doing it.
Well, absolutely, because people are often don't even know why they're doing the things they're doing. But you have to do it because that's what everyone else is doing. And sometimes you ask people the question, why are you doing that? I just got to do it. Why have you got to do it? But people don't have a chance to plan things. They don't think about things. They don't sort of sit back. And it's funny you mentioned, the more you meditate, the more time you get. Because again, I'll go back to my quotes, which I love, but there is actually a Gandhi quote which says, I've got a really, really busy day today. I'm going to have to meditate for twice as long. And I just thought that was classic, because obviously, like the other side of the coin is people go, well, I haven't got time to meditate. I've got so much to do.
Well, I was speaking to a new friend who I've made, and they were texting me to find out what I was doing, and I almost felt guilty because they were working all day. And they said, oh, what are you doing now? And I said, oh, I'm off walking. And then about 2 hours later, they said, what are you doing now? And I said, oh, I'm off walking with another friend. And then later in the evening, they said, what are you doing? I said, oh, I'm sat in a field with my dog. And actually, I felt quite guilty in many respects. And on the other side, they were saying, gosh, you have a lot of time to do these things. And I said, no, I've created the time and I've created the type of life where I can do these things because they're integral to what I actually want to achieve.
Yep. I think it kind of links in with things like Tim Ferriss's 4-hour workbook as well, because when you start to get control of your time and your diary and you think about things, like you say, 1 minute you're out walking, then you're walking the dog, and then you're doing this, and then you're sort of cooking something and actually experiencing the cooking process and actually what it tastes like, because you're actually going to get 10 minutes to sit down and actually eat it, which is going to be quite nice. You get to do all these things, but at the end of the working day, you've actually done more than most people have done.
Yeah.
Because we live in a culture where, we're brought up that you trade an hour of your time for an hour's pay. Mm. So everything has been related to how long you spent on it. And quite often it's not related to actually what did you do while you were there.
Yeah.
Like when I used to work in, jobs where I was paid by the time, the majority of the days I went there, I did very much as little as possible. However, during probably it reflected in my weekly salary. But the point is, for 7-8 hours a day, I was trapped there.
Yeah.
I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do or needed to do. I was just trapped there. However, I was unproductive. I wasn't really doing anything. Like it got to the stage where, you'd walk in at 9:05 and they'd be like, have you seen the time? You're late. And you're thinking, if I'd have come in at 2:00 this afternoon, I'd have probably achieved the same thing. I don't know what you're panicking about, And it kind of expresses this in Tim Ferriss's 4-hour workbook, because he creates the sort of thought process that most people's working jobs could be done in 4 hours a week.
Yeah.
However, they're working 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. Yeah. And it's just a case of thinking, what needs to be done by when? Mm-hmm. And one of the classic points in the book is deadlines. If you know that you've got till Friday lunchtime to do something, then on Monday you're probably not going to do much. Until in the end you actually start it on Thursday morning. And it's that classic thing which I used to have in coaching where people go, I've got 30 days. And you say, well, what are you going to do today? They go, well, nothing. So you haven't got 30, you've got 29 days. Now what are you going to do tomorrow? Nothing. So you haven't got 29, you've got 28. So why did you convince yourself you had 30 days? And it sort of relates back to this working week, like everyone's like, oh, I'm so busy. And it's because they relate everything to the amount of time they spent on it. Mm. But they didn't actually do bugger all. They were so busy running around. What did they do? And, and you say, well, what did you do with your life? Oh, I didn't have time to do anything with my life. And it's quite sad really, because these people are being genuine. They're not trying to sound funny. Mm. They are really trying to find their way in life. They're doing the best they can. But quite often they're not thinking about the obvious question. And then when they do get an hour to think about their life, they think, oh, thank God for that. I better watch EastEnders before I miss it for another night. You're thinking, this is your chance. This is your lucky break. You can do something here. Oh, no, don't worry about it. Better find out what .Cotton's doing this week, Because I suppose, people are so worn out doing nothing that when it comes to an opportunity to do something for themselves, they haven't got the energy, and it goes back to sort of what we were talking about, the energy before. People are leaking energy in their environments through the people they meet, even the things they do. Like when you realise that you're trading an hour of your time for like a couple of quid, that actually takes a lot of energy out of you, because time is a form of energy as well, and everything's an exchange, and you're exchanging a whole hour of your life which you will never see again for a few quid. And by the time you paid your tax, you couldn't probably buy yourself dinner out of it. Like you can't do anything with it. However, an hour is you can do a lot with an hour, especially if you're focused and it's invested in yourself.
I completely agree. It's interesting that, because I started to see that lots of my time was actually wasted when I was working. I was running around doing work for people that was never going to be used. 90% of what I did was never used. My time was just predominantly wasted, and you'd be in meetings where nothing would come out of it. And just this week, one of my friends was saying that they'd spent quite a long time on a conference call, about an hour and a half, for a 10-minute moment so that they could actually say what they were doing. And I just thought, oh my God, an hour and a half of my time, that would be absolutely awful. And, because now I'm really very bothered about how I spend my time and who I spend it with. For me, it's about, I constantly think, actually, is this benefiting me? Is this going to take me to where I want it to take me to? Actually, if it's not, then I'm quite callous about, I'll protect it.
Well, absolutely. Which brings you back to your point of the people you kind of share your time with as well. Because one of the things that I find nowadays is, I'm quite a relaxed person. However, if you're going to speak to someone at 2:00, then at 2:00 you speak to someone. That's how you plan and manage your time.
Yeah.
Now, if they suddenly turn up at 2:15, that's 15 minutes that's gone. Now, when you speak to people who work 9 till 5, 15 minutes is here or there, and and I've worked in the corporate life where we have a 2:00 meeting, I beg your pardon, at 3:30 you're still waiting for people to turn up, because they're answering their emails, and I was thinking, well, this is where the drain of everyone's energy is going, if you sort of say you're going to be there at 2:00, you're there at 2:00, you finished at 2:20, as you said you was going to be finished at 2:20, then you can go out and enjoy your life. And that's one of the things, that people sort of, and again, it comes to the whole doing and the physical practice of what you do, like when you get simple things like that, the basics in check, then you've got the freedom to do the things you want to do and the time you want to do what you want to do. But most people sort of have these meetings and they say, right, why didn't you get anything done this afternoon? They said, well, I had a meeting. Okay, what time was the meeting? Well, it's supposed to be 2, but it started at 3. Okay, well, how long was the meeting going to last for? Well, it just kind of ran until it ran. Well, what do you mean? Like, you didn't have like an end time before you started the meeting? Like, because then you could have planned what you was going to do after it, but now you're telling me you didn't plan what you was going to do after it because you didn't know if you was going to get any time after it. Well, yeah, it kind of went like that. You're thinking, now do you start to understand the fact that you don't have any time?
Yeah.
And again, it's very, very simple stuff. Like, you're not trying to sort of recreate the wheel. You're not trying to sort of, say anything mind-blowing. It's just very basic. What time will you be there and what time will you leave? Oh, that's a good idea, Dean. Well, it's not really, is it? Let's be honest.
Right, I'm sat here with Dean Grimshaw from Warrior Coaching and the founder of Team Warrior, who do some inspirational work, and we should touch on that in the next part. So I'm just going to put some music on. We're going to have a little bit of a break, and we'll be back after this. So, Dean, I've got Dean Grimshaw with me here today, and it's a cracking conversation so far, and if everybody likes him and has enjoyed it, then please get in the chat box. Let's hear from everybody. And if you've got any questions for Dean, that would be brilliant. And he does coaching, he does personal training, and I don't really. Is it a team of people that kind of come together collectively with Team Warrior? Just kind of explain that to me.
Well, Team Warrior is a strange concept, really. Essentially, it's a fundraising team. But the idea we set it up in the first place was just to kind of try to inspire people to do a little bit more than they can actually do. Because I quite like physical challenges, and it got to the stage where people were saying, do you know what, Dean, I'd love to do a challenge like that, but I'm not you. Like, it's easy for you. It's easy for you. And it seemed to be a bit of a theme of people thinking things were easy for other people. The truth is, it ain't easy for other people. It's actually, a bit of a challenge. However, it's really not that complicated. If you want to run a marathon, then just start running, and you'll be able to run a marathon relatively quickly if you follow a program. So we do physical challenges to raise money for great causes and great charities, but hopefully part of it is going to be more than that. It's about inspiring people, what they can do with their lives. So the strap line, I should say, of Team Warrior is being the best that we can be so that we can empower others to be the best that they can be. And in a funny way, it goes all the way back to what you said at the start, the fact that you share your skills and your expertise in nutrition because that's what you do with your life. That's how you live your life. That's how you eat. And you share with things exactly what you embody because you believe in it. You believe in it so much it becomes a part of your life. And the premise of Team Warrior was about the fact that we knew a lot of fundraisers who all wanted to change the world. However, none of them wanted to change themselves. So we just started a group based on the premise that if you change yourself, you do change the world. And that was kind of what started it, really, and it's kind of grown into a fundraising team with various challenges and inspire people, to do a bit more for other people, and also hopefully change themselves so that the change is sustainable. Because if you do a car wash and you raise 500 quid, then it's fantastic, but at the end of it, nothing really changed. But if you really sort of change yourself and become a more valuable person in yourself and with the people around you, then you make a massive difference to society, and it goes to levels that you're not even aware of, in the changes that you make. And that's kind of what I was hoping to inspire people to really change themselves, really focus on themselves, become a better version of themselves, and then spread that message.
That's really interesting, but let me just say what Rusty's just said to me. Hi, Rusty. He's just said, hi, all up the rebellion. Thank you very much, Rusty. I completely agree. And let me just get back to what I was talking about with Dean. Yeah, it's really interesting what you're saying about you're inspiring people to actually, to do something different in their lives and to actually see that they can actually take themselves forward and change things. Because I do think that nowadays people seem to be really, and I'm going to coin, I think it's David Icke's phrase, they're very sheeple in the way they move themselves forward. They almost, I have really noticed it when I've been doing body combat just lately, and which is kind of a group aerobics combat class. And it was good fun until the instructor started to have really come up to me and get rather upset about the fact I wasn't doing the same moves as everybody else to the music at times. And I was kind of going off on a tangent and, to come and going shouting at me, left foot, left foot, left foot. And I was going, yeah. It's not that I don't understand. It's just that I'm not bothered. I'm here to enjoy myself and get fit. But I felt that, everybody else was diving around doing exactly as they were told by her. And I just thought, well, I really feel that's almost representative of society now in many respects. They really want to be told what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. And what you're almost doing is giving people an understanding that they can do things for themselves if they want. They can think and create and, and go out and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is as simple as that. When someone says, I want to do this, you say, fantastic, let's do it. And they look at you like you're crazy, like, oh, well, I was expecting like the master plan. Like, don't get me wrong, there's steps to put in place, and that's why I kind of, trained as a coach. But ultimately, do you know what? It really isn't that complicated, which was why we use physical challenges really as a demonstration of what can be done. Because as we all know, the physical realm is just the very tip of the iceberg. However, if we start exploring that physical realm and working with it and improving it and, growing within it, then the rest of it all starts to slot into place. So it kind of hits my sort of master the body first, which is why I kind of like getting people to really see what they can do. And we had a guy, last year ran 5 marathons with us in 5 days. Yet the year previous, he'd run 1.5 miles in a week and weighed over 20 stone. And, it kind of sort of was sort of making friends on Twitter, and that's kind of how we bumped into him. And he was kind of like, oh yeah, that sounds good. I'd love to do something like that, And I said, well, let's go. Let's do it. You're in the team. He was like, well, no, I can't run. I said, well, no, you can't run now, but the good thing is the 5 marathons is next year. And he kind of surpassed himself. And not only did he do it, but he contacted me at the end of last year, early part of this year, saying, Dean, I'm going to do a new challenge. I'm going to run all the way from Norfolk to Middlesbrough, because he's based in Norfolk and he's a chef there, and this was his own idea. He's not actually done it yet, but I've got every faith that he will do it. And I looked on the map, and it's like 200 odd miles. And he wants to do it in a one-er.
In one go?
Which would basically be something like a 48-hour run or something, And again, people say, well, that can't be done. Well, we already know it can. And if you decide it can be done and you're committed to doing it, then that's all it is. And I think one of the points around that is, I think it's T. Harv Eker wrote a book called sort of Millionaire Secrets of the Mind or something like that. And in it, he wrote some sort of things about relationships with money. And a lot of it can be related to absolutely anything. And one of the key things I thought it was very good the way he wrote it was, first, you want to do something. Secondly, you choose to do something. And then thirdly, you commit to it. And when you commit to it, it happens. Yeah. And I thought that was a really sort of great point, because a lot of people go, oh yeah, I want to make £1 million. I want a sports car. I want to run a marathon. But at the want stage, nothing's happening. It's just a wish list. It's like there's nothing. And then the second stage, you start choosing it. So you might choose to go to the gym. You might choose to make decisions, to maybe eat better, train harder, read a bit more. And you're making decisions around it. But even that stage, you haven't really made it yet. The point is, you have to commit to it. You go, right, I'm going to run the marathon. That's it. And the rest is history. And, a lot of people say, Dean, you make it sound so simple. Well, if you want it to be simple, it is. If you'd like it to stay complicated and you like it to be full of problems, then don't worry, just stay the way you are. But I don't understand why people put barriers in place when they really don't need to. And when people start to get that, like when you go through a process and you see, actually, I committed to it and it happened, then you realise that it had nothing to do with running a marathon. It actually was a process for life. And every single thing that you do will go within a similar set of principles. And if you want to do it, then yeah, great, commit to it and do it. And that's kind of what it was about, really.
It's really interesting. I've got a quote here from Stephen Lena, and off his website, on the meaning of life, that he was having a conversation with a friend, and this is over 15 years ago, and they were saying, I don't think the point of life is to accomplish a certain level of external success. I believe we're actually here to acquire and enjoy experiences.
Well, yeah, it's very cliche, but everyone sort of comes back to the journey. You know, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And do you know what? It's absolutely true. You know, wherever you are right now, it's a fantastic part of the journey. So just enjoy it and realise where you are in the journey, you know, instead of just kind of milling with it and running with it and thinking I haven't started yet. Because there are a lot of people who walk around with that mindset. They go, well, I haven't actually started the journey yet, so I just dip into everyone else's lives while I'm thinking about starting. And they kind of treat themselves as if everything's on hold. But as you know, nothing's ever on hold. It's always in flux. It's always moving. Yeah. So wherever you are right now, you are on that journey. And this is the bit that's magical. And it's appreciating that, you know, because I sort of spent a short time at TA and I did a military course. And one of the instructors came over one day, and it was a particularly crap day, to be honest. It was raining, went a long way, you know, blisters, pain, injuries. And he said, guys, you got to relish the misery. And I couldn't have thought of some more crap words that he could have said, you know. And I said, well, what do you mean you got to relish the misery? He said, well, when you look back on your life, you don't remember the days that just went by in a breeze where you sort of marched 50 miles and you didn't feel a single ache and it was lovely. Like, you will remember that time when it was absolutely crap. And they're the stories you're going to share. And the funny thing was, it is, you know, like, sometimes you know, you'll be there with your friends socialising. You go, oh, there was this one time, it was horrendous. Let me tell you, you know, the tents were in the breeze like Chinese laundry. It was absolute, the hell was coming down. I thought I was going to die, you know. And it becomes a cracking story, and it becomes one of those parts of your life that you just cherish, you know, because you're just glad that you experienced it so you can share it. And I think sometimes it's about looking at life that way. Like, you know, I think when you look back on this part of your life, you look back on it fondly, you know.
Yeah.
But at the time, you're so busy sort of not enjoying it, you forget how great it was. Like, the funny thing is, I listen to my dad sometimes, and I remember like 20 odd years ago when I was a boy, and he really wasn't that happy about life. You know, I don't recall him really enjoying it that much, you know. But then when I hear him talk about it now, it was like the greatest thing, you know. and I think it's something that we all experience at some point. We all look back on those moments, and this guy said to me, relish the misery, because it's the stories you're going to tell one day. And for some reason, it's always stuck with me, you know. Like, whenever I'm sort of doing a run or a challenge and it's going a bit wrong, you know, it's all falling through, you know, and you started it with motivation and you get to that sort of wall, you know you're going to come through it because you got the belief and the faith in it, and generally does come good. But for that period, you know that's going to be a story. That's going to be something that you're going to talk about for years and years, and you're going to laugh about it with the people you experienced it with. And again, you know, as long as you experience it with the right people and you're in the right circle, then hey, you know, relish the misery. It's all good fun.
It comes down to sometimes where we're socially conditioned to actually almost value specific types of accomplishments in this life, and, you know, the celebrity status and the money and things like that. And actually, it's not those that give us that experience. It's those everyday experiences, like you're saying, where, you know, you've decided to do something, and the step-by-step process of getting there is what gives you the stories of, you know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Your war wounds, effectively.
Well, even like the celebrities who've attained it will say the same thing, you know. Either they got it too quickly and they didn't really feel the satisfaction because it wasn't really what they wanted. Because that's one of the downsides of, you know, sort of celebrities that are just chucked out there, like your Big Brother contestants who are just suddenly famous and haven't done the groundwork. It's not so much the end goal, it's the kind of who you became during the process and the journey. Mm. So when people do go off and win the lottery and they get 10 millions, you know, on a regular basis, they kind of do lose it and go back to where they were before because they didn't have that journey of attaining it. So it didn't have the value.
Yeah.
Whereas if you genuinely want to make £1 million, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's the process and the journey of how you made it which makes it special.
Yeah.
But when you just, like you say, like, go, right, that's it, I've seen the secret, I'm going to imagine it's in my glove box in my car, you know, even if it really was, like, it would be, there'd be people listening to this going, oh, I don't know, Dean, I'd be pretty chuffed, but it won't be as chuffed as you think you'll be. The fantasy is better than the reality, if you know what I mean.
And it's really interesting. Now, I believe that a lot of people, one, don't have a lot of belief in themselves to be able to do what you're talking about, and therefore just think it's way beyond them. But also, many people now live their lives through the television and don't actually experience life. They experience memories through the TV and a two-dimensional piece of technology that's in their lives and is basically dominating their lives.
Well, yeah, you've had a good example of that is 60s children. You know, like my dad was a 60s child and he was just had a lifelong obsession with the 60s. And he'll go on about it being the most fantastic era. And to be fair, it does look like it was pretty good. But I'll sort of say to him, so, all right, Pops, what happened? Well, there was the Kinks and the Stones and then there was the Beatles. Oh, you knew them, did you? Like, no, what actually happened? Well, we took a man to the moon. We won the World Cup. Oh, well, you won it, did you? You were there, were you? Like, what were you doing? And for a whole 10-year stretch, I don't know what he did. He was too busy sort of following what everyone else was doing. However, for the duration of his life since then, he's been reflecting on it as if it was his life. And I'm not knocking him. I love my dad. But it kind of highlighted the way society was. You know, when people say, it was absolutely fantastic then. Well, why? Well, because, you know, this band was at number one. And that made it fantastic. Like, I'm kind of missing the point. What was you doing while they were at number one? Well, I was listening to it on TV. Well, no, Top of the Pops was still on in those days. Fantastic program. And I still, like, I sort of say to you, but what was you doing, Dad? What happened in your life? What changes did you make? How did you sort of develop? And do you know what? He doesn't know. Because, as you quite rightly said, like, you know, there are a portion of people who live their life through what the media is telling them other people are living their lives doing. You know, I'm quite famous for giving out quotes. So, you know, I'm obviously taking a lot of interest in role models as well, you know. But at the same time, I've got to try and sort of relate it to myself and what I was doing. So that when someone says, well, in the year 2015, what were you doing? I can't just say I was quoting Mahatma Gandhi quotes because he inspired me. But there's got to be something more to it, isn't there? I've got to have done something in my own life. And that's kind of, you know, what I try to do with my life. I try to think, well, what was I doing? What did I achieve? Was my life on hold or was I living, you know? And that's it really, you know, because I'm a little bit philosophical about the whole life and death thing. You know, I'm a firm believer in that we should really go for our bucket list and not just, I don't understand why people get out when they're sort of too old and decrepit to do anything about it. They just start bricking it because they've only got a few years left, if you know what I mean. I think it's something that we should all be doing on a regular basis because, you know, passing on is going to happen. There's no doubt about that to an extent. But, you know, living is a choice. And I don't think enough people take that choice.
That's really interesting because I remember talking to someone a long time ago now, about 10 years, and they were in a job for life effectively. And I won't say where. And they said to me they were just waiting till 50 so that they could collect their pension and then they planned to do all these things. And what was going through my mind constantly was that, well, how do they know they'll have the energy and the health and everything to be able to do it at that point? And I just felt that was such a life lost.
Oh, absolutely. You know, like, I worked in a role where my boss was on his second marriage because unfortunately his previous partner passed away, you know, and I just remember sort of being a bit heartbroken hearing the story because they planned a fantastic life together. He had a really good job. She had a really good job and they were putting everything away for their future. And, you know, through no fault of anyone's, like, she was taken ill and obviously it didn't work out. And it's a very extreme story, but it was just heartbreaking to hear that happens. You know, the fact that someone sort of passed on having so much to offer the world, having so much to give, being so successful, but they never got to experience it because everything was planned for a time which unfortunately they didn't get to. And I just find that heartbreaking to think that that's what happens, and it still happens on a regular basis. Like you say, there are people planning for their retirement, and you've only got to look at like your Eddie Stobart. Like he didn't last long at the end of his business, and it's such a shame because everything he'd achieved, he didn't get to enjoy the fruits of the labour. And it's because I guess people are looking at maybe the wrong goals and the wrong things, and what they think is important isn't really what's important to them. And it comes back to the whole point that we just need time to breathe, a bit of space to think, and time to actually fully understand what is really, really important to us. Now, one of the things that I find quite powerful, and again, it's a bit deep and philosophical, but I love everything associated with the warrior spirit, which is why I use warrior coaching in my title. And one of the warriors was the sort of the samurai warrior, basically. And one of their philosophies is you don't know what you're supposed to live for until you know what you're prepared to die for. Now, when you look at Western society, nobody's prepared to die anything until they have children. And then everyone says the same thing, well, I'll die for my kids. So it's almost like no one's got anything that's that important to them, that means that much to them, that it's worth putting everything on the line. And that's how they knew what was worth living for, and that's how they lived their life, because their way of life was so important that it was worth everything. And it wasn't to say that they were prepared to die that easily, because they wasn't. Life was very special to them. It meant a lot to them, and they cherished it, and they used it. They constantly developed themselves because they appreciated just how special it was. That every moment was a special moment. And, it's just very interesting that when you sort of, speak to people in the West, that no one's got anything that they believe in so strongly that they're prepared to give everything up. However, and because they don't believe in anything strongly, they're prepared to give everything up, there's nothing they're really willing to fight for, which is why a lot of people kind of live on the line in the middle of mediocrity, of never really sort of pushing for anything, but then never having to struggle for anything. It's just very sort of, within the comfort zone, I suppose. And it's a bit sort of controversial to think that way, but I thought when I read that, with the samurai and going through like some of their texts and the codes, I thought it was very powerful that you don't know what you're supposed to live for until you know what you're prepared to die for. And, from my experience in the West, no one knows what they're prepared to die for until they're a parent, and then it's always my kids. But the problem with that, and, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have that philosophy. What I'm saying is what happens now in the West is that everyone gives up their life for the next generation. And then what they do is actually teach and train the next generation to have the same. So they're actually just raising until they're at a certain age, and they have their own family, and then they're giving up the life of their family. And it goes into a never-ending cycle. And then at some point you look at the cycle and you think, well, which one of them lived their life? Because they was all living it for someone else. And sometimes when I say things like that, you get judged for being a parent. You think, well, surely everything has to go into your child. And don't get me wrong, like, if you're going to take the responsibility of being a parent, then yeah, you do have to sort of cater for everything they need, make sure they're, nurtured, make sure they're empowered, make sure they got the room to grow and develop. But what's more important than that, I think, is to teach them how to live the life they're going to love. And if you're showing them that have fun while you can, because as soon as you have kids, that's it, it's over. I don't really get what you're teaching them. Like, I don't want that life for my children, that they grow to a certain point and they go, right, I've got kids now. Oh, well, I can't enjoy myself no more because they've got to have everything. I've just got to sort of waste away, And it goes back to the point that I can't teach my children to reach for their dreams. All I can do is reach for my own. And I genuinely believe that. I can give them all the positive thoughts that I want to give them. I can share with them what I want to share with them. But ultimately, I can't make them achieve their dreams. And we live in a culture where, like, I was told by my dad that I could do anything. And you get to the age where you go, well, what are you going to do, Dad? And it's not to be out of order, but you're just a child. You're inquisitive. You're asking why? Well, what about this? And I got the same answer every time. Well, it's not about me, son. It's about you now. I can't do it, but you can. And there was a point where I started to not believe in it. I think, well, if you're telling me that I can do it, but you can't, that tells me you're telling me something you don't believe. Therefore, how am I going to believe it? And that's basically what I don't want to pass on to the next generation of, oh, I can't do it, but you have a crack at it. I had a go, I messed it up, but, I'll tell you what, you try and have a good life. I don't really see how that's a good message to share.
No, for me, it's you're absolutely right around it's the motivation that matters within your own life, because it influences other people. You inspire other people and you inspire your children and the next generation. And it's really important. And I read a quote just recently which said that a life lived without passion is a life wasted. And I just thought that's so right.
It's absolutely right. And that's one of the things I'm very sort of keen on working as a coach, because again, the wrong people can think that if you're a coach that you've got all the answers and you're a guru, but that's not what a coach is supposed to be. A coach is just supposed to sort of help you get on that path, then you get on that path and you can always turn to your coach, but ultimately where the path goes is up to you. All that a coach can do is give you the direction and a few tools, to get you started and get you moving. But at the end of the day, the only person who really knows the answers is you. And that's all a coach is there to do, is just to get you to really start to learn about yourself. So we have that with the 5 marathons. Like, people come out the other end, they go, well, what's next? And you can create another challenge, but quite a lot of the learning they've already done. And a lot of it is, well, it's up to you now. Like, where do you want to go? Like, now you've learned that you can do it, what do you want to do with it? There's certain things that you can help them with, but the last thing you want as a coach is for a client to be beholden to you and expect you to have all the answers. Because at some point, it's your hope that they do outgrow you.
Well,
and if you don't want them to outgrow you, then how can you call yourself a coach? Because
I was going to say that's absolutely where a coach should be. I always liken coaching, and I'm often asked to explain coaching and mentoring, and I always say the coach stands at the bottom of the mountain and will actually ask you the questions which you then question yourself on how to get up there and the best way to do it. A mentor has achieved the mountain and is standing at a certain point on it, is helping you actually get up, giving advice. And so that's how I see the difference in them. But a coach, you will only be with them for the amount of time that is actually right for you. They signpost for you. They help you question yourself, and they help you to take a level of responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the role that I want to take in, my children's lives as well, because again, growing up with the whole coaches and things, I've met a lot of coaches that had families, and in a weird kind of way, it's quite often coaches that have more messed up kids. Because they start meddling in their kids and going, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to optimize their mindset. I'm going to make them think like this. I'm going to develop them. And when they're wrong, I'm going to get them in the right way. But the truth is, I don't know where the kids are going to develop to. I can only give them certain tools. There's some things that they're going to do that's going to far surpass me. There's some things they're going to do I'm not going to understand. There's, you have to give them that freedom to grow. And, having seen so many coaches almost mess up their own kids, and they kind of sit there going, oh, well, what it is, they've got this disorder and that disorder, and, they kind of use all these names to sort of, but what it is they've just been sort of messed with too much. Sometimes people just need that time to understand themselves, experience themselves, and to grow. You can't keep bombarding people with, you got to develop, you got to grow, you got to change, you got to think, you got to do this. Like, that's not how it works. The real point of being a child is just to experience life in a safe environment, so they can find some answers out for themselves. And then when they get to the age where they want more answers, they'll ask. They'll say, well, so yeah, I'm very sort of, I find it very important that coaches don't get too above themselves, and think that they're creating the change. All I'm trying to do through the coaching really is show the way. But where the way leads depends on the person taking the path, really.
On one of your blogs, you were talking about synchronicity and coincidences. How would that fit in with that?
Synchronicity and coincidences. Well,
signposting, I suppose.
Well, it depends which way you want to look at it. It can go all over them. It's quite an open question, to be honest.
Yes.
But the classic one is, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. So quite often people get coaches in their lives. They don't realise they've got a coach. And quite often the best coaches don't know their coaches. So it is a case of, you'll find the right coach when you're ready for them. But in terms of synchronicity, I'm not sure where you want me to go with that, or...
It's interesting for me just recently because as I've made decisions, now my father, who died about three years ago, he really liked robins. And there were robins all around his house, and he loved birds in many different ways, my father. But anyway, mainly robins. And when he died, robins just turned up in my life a lot. And when I make decisions now that are right, a robin turns up more often than not. And I see these as major signposts for me in my life, and I take responsibility for the decision making. But actually, sometimes you get signposts that come along which really do reinforce your journey and the direction of your journey.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean now. Yeah, I think it's something, again, a lot of it comes down to awareness, because a lot of people get these signs on a regular basis, but they're not interpreting them and understanding them. Like the first time I really learnt about the signs was really when I started reading the Carlos Castaneda books, and they always talked about, that's a sign. And I started thinking, right, what does it all mean, And then when you start thinking about it, you start to see them in your own life. But the strange thing about those is only you can interpret them. Like for instance, as a coach, I couldn't say, watch out for robins, because it wouldn't have meant anything to anybody else except for you. Like, you're the only person who had that connection with robins, and you're the only person who, once it happened, could have interpreted it. So yeah, a lot of that is about the fact that as a coach, it's not something that you can just say, right, today's lesson is how to spot signs. A lot of it, in that respect, is going to be just about understanding yourself and starting to interpret what's going on, because you generally find that you don't even mention topics like that, and then they come back and say, look, I saw something today which shows me I'm on the right path. Like, now I've said that, I'm trying to think of an example recently, but I can't think of an obvious one, but they come back and they tell you that they saw this thing, and that's when you think, that's interesting, because I never mentioned that, and they said it themselves. So I find that when they get that awareness themselves on the right path, people spot these things for themselves. And at first they're actually quite afraid to tell you, because they go, well, I saw something, but I don't want to say anything in case you think I'm a nutcase. And you'll say, well, no, just tell me. Like, I'm pretty open to a lot of things. Well, no, you're going to think I'm a Fruit Loop, and then, like you say, they say something, and it'll be along the lines of, I saw this robin, and it made me think of my father, and you go, yes, that's exactly like the connection. But because of the kind of people that are attracted to my coaching with the whole warrior thing, quite often it's been it used to be sort of the young adult males who wanted military careers, so I never sort of suggested things like that until they came up with it. Oh, by the way, what you'll find now is your chakras working in this zone. They just would have looked at me like I was a bit strange. So I used to kind of wait for it to rise, and sure enough, like you say with the synchronicities, they do rise, and then they notice them. And the funny thing is seeing how they try to feed it back to you and go, well, I kind of want to tell you something, but I don't want you to think I'm an idiot, So yeah, and I think that relates to a bit about what we were saying right at the start of the talk about how there is a shift happening, and these subjects aren't as like taboo and crazy anymore. When you talk about connections, energetic connections, and this made me think of my late father, my late grandma. No one thinks you're nuts anymore. Like, people think, oh yeah, that happened to me. So I think it's things like that that's starting to open it up and get people to explore it in a safe environment, really, because that's one of the reasons kept it closed for so long, where people wanted to explore it, but there was never the environment where they could. And they'll be in their circle of friends and they think, I wonder if I ask them about this, what they'll say. And for quite a lot of cases, people think, well, I'm not going to ask my friends. That they might think I'm off the wall, if you know what I mean. But there'll be a lot of people listening to this who are thinking, what? So maybe I could just ask someone. There's a possibility they get it, and that would be like a massive sort of paradigm shift. Like, you mean if I mentioned it, somebody might think that it's actually a genuine subject and I'm not just crackers.
Sorry, go on.
No, that was kind of it really, about the fact that the perception's changing, and I think people are accepting these things as actually, do you know what, that's happening.
Yeah, I think as we work with people, they tend to clear the space, and therefore their energies become more open to those things happening. And they have more mind space, more head space to actually see. Because I feel that with the stress of getting more stuff done, getting more success and all those sorts of things, we find it hard to actually escape that. And it's only when we start to clear out those needs to do all that, do we then start to see the signposts.
Yeah, I think you're correct. I think, and it comes down to that thing that once you're sort of got a bit of space in your brain, you've got a bit more focus on where you're going, what you want to achieve, the route, the planning, then you start getting an awareness of things that obviously lend itself to that process. And you do spot things, and even going back to one of the points I made earlier on, I think quite often these signs were there all along, but you were so muddled in your mindset, you were so confused with where you were going, you're so busy rushing, you're so busy running, that you're not going to spot them, you're not going to interpret them, because on a very crude basis, if you look at your mindset, your brain's almost like the genie of the lamp, and it says, okay, what do you want to know? And on a regular basis, people aren't giving it a clear answer. They're just like, right, I've got to go to work, got to pick the kids up, got to go dry cleaning off. Then then I've got to go to the bank. And the brain's thinking, well, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And in the end, it's getting mixed messages. So the brain's kind of just throwing random things at you. And at the end of the day, nothing was really achieved. But if you start a day with with a very distinct, focused, positive intention, like today, I'm going to find myself, a new teacher because I'm ready to grow. And the brain goes, right, I can work with that. And then like you say, like maybe by lunchtime, things will start clicking into place. You might spot an ad in the paper that you didn't normally notice was there. You think, oh, that's interesting. I'll keep that in mind. And then you go along the road and you see another sign. And you see these things because the brain's got something solid to look for. And it understands what is being asked of it. And that's kind of how the brain works, really. It's just like a servant to you, isn't it? Like it just processes the information based on what you've asked it to do. And most people haven't asked it to do anything. And then they moan at it afterwards, go, oh, my brain's such a mess. It's like, well, you didn't really give it a chance. You didn't ask it to do anything. So what did you expect it to throw at you?
That's really interesting where, you're saying that we're not asking our brains to do anything. Because most people will go, actually, my brain is constantly working and I cannot even shut my mind down anymore because I can't sleep. But actually, we're so bombarded with all this information and stuff that we're doing to work our way through the day that often we're not giving ourselves a clear intention of what we truly want to achieve moving forward because we're so busy just doing.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I learned the hard way, because one of my weaknesses used to be the fact that my mind's all over the place. And people would say, well, maybe you're not setting out what you want. And I'm thinking, are you kidding? I know what I want. I want a new car, a new house. I want this, I want that, I want that, I want this. I know exactly what I want. I've got a list out. I've got the top 50 there, the top 100 there. And then obviously if you look at it logically, you think, right, okay, so you've asked your brain to check out for these top 50 things. But when you do get a sign, you don't even know which thing it related to anyway. If you know what I mean? Like, it's just too much. And the thing I've learned the hard way is we do need to try and get a bit more focus. Like, if your brain's looking out for 1, 2 or 3 things, all the important things, then things start to click into place. Because that's the other side of the coin as well. When you've got a list of 50 or 100, most of them you're kind of adding in there just to make the numbers up. You're thinking, well, I've got 100 spaces, so I'll just throw in that Porsche. Like, would you really want it? Not really, but hey, if I've got 100, I might as well have it, And you kind of throw in these things on your list which you don't really want. And the classic one is always, if someone doesn't know what they want, they'll always ask for £1 million.
Yeah.
And you say, why do you want £1 million? I don't know, I just do. They go, well, I'll tell you that's exactly why you haven't got it. Because you don't know why you want it. And you speak to other people, they go, I know exactly what to do with £1 million. And you go, brilliant. Tell me exactly what you do with £1 million. They go, I buy a house and a car. Brilliant. How much would the house cost? Don't know. How much would the car cost? Don't know. Well, how do you know you need $1 million? But
you don't need more.
Exactly, And there's nothing wrong with wanting $1 million, but you need to know why you want it. And that's the missing point of why most people haven't got it. You know, I'm not going to pretend to be a millionaire, but what I will say is if I wanted $1 million, I'd know why I wanted it. Because you have to know what you're going to do with it. Because $1 million is a very generic number. But if you specifically want something and you're focused on it, and you're going to get your brain to move forwards and get it, then you're going to know to the penny what it is you want. Now you don't need £1 million. You need 1,582 pence or whatever it is. You know.
Yeah.
Now that's something specific. Your brain's going to look for that. But yeah, you know, people who don't know what they want go, well, I asked for £1 million, didn't work out. I've tried your system, it sucks. But, you know, it's like, well, you didn't try it, did you? Because you have to ask something you genuinely want. Because why would your mindset and brain work for something you don't really want that you just say you want when there's things that you need? And I think that's the thing that people kind of struggle with. They get to this thing of, right, I can manifest anything. Right, brilliant. And they just think, what's the most ludicrous thing I can come up with just to prove this wrong? You know, well, I want a goldfish that's got 3 tails, 11 stripes, and and I want it to be at my local garden centre by 5:04 this evening. Do you really want it? Like, if it's there, would you be happy? Probably not, no.
I think I find that difficult with coaches, that when they're asking you to set out a series of goals, and they're very much just focused on achieving the goal. And for me, it's actually, the goal's kind of a milestone through my life. It's not actually the main thing, because actually by the time you've often achieved the goal, you sometimes don't want it. You've sometimes changed what you wanted anyway. And it's the journey to getting there. That's that whole journey thing that I'm very, attached to, as you know. But, and that's what's more important to me. And the goal is just a milestone which says that I've actually been disciplined and focused enough to actually get myself there.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. 'Cause I once spoke to a very good coach actually called Jazz Rizal, when he set up a system called the Enemy Diamond, and he came up with the process that the East and the West think of things differently. And obviously I kind of resonated it quite well because I quite like Eastern philosophy. And his sort of approach was, in the West, they find the goal. No, they start with the goal, I beg your pardon, and then they find the energy to achieve that goal. He says in the East they do things totally differently. They first find out where the energy is, and then the goal takes care of itself. Mm. And I thought that was a really sort of powerful point, really, because if you look at it on a map, for instance, like in the West, people will go, right, where do I want to go? And they'll plot it on the map and they'll start running. Whereas in the East, they'll go, right, well, where am I on the map? Which I think is a much more important piece of information for most people. Yeah. And I use a lot of navigation work sort of in the Brecons and stuff to help people with coaching stuff, just purely for that very basic reason, which is if you know where you are, where you want to go, and you've got a map, you can get anywhere. So it doesn't really matter what you want to do. If you know where you are, where you want to go, and you've got a map, you can go anywhere. That is it. That is life in a nutshell. Like, I've just told you the secret of life. That's it. You can be happy now. However, most people don't know where they are. They don't really know where they want to go. Mm. So how do they plot a route? And if you sort of look at it on the West and think, oh, right, I want to get here and I think I'm there. If you look at any map and say, I think I'm there and I want to get there, if you're not exactly where you thought you were at the start, when you get to the end, you won't be in the right place. So that's what I thought was quite powerful about the idea that in the East they find the energy first. Mm. And, that's why they're so very deep into their chakras, their meridians, their chi, which, you go to India and it's your prana. But so in all these different areas, like, they've got the same sort of philosophies. If you take it really back to its basics, they all started off with the same basic theories and philosophies without speaking to each other, which makes you think they must have had something in that. Yeah. However, when coaching was first invented, it was almost invented as an accountability tool, which was why I found it difficult to resonate with at first, because it was very much like, what are you going to do when you're going to do it? Right, go. And then I'm just going to ride you until you get it done, And then they call this coaching. Like, what are you going to do when you're going to do it? Right, great. You think, well, how is that coaching? That's just clarifying a goal. And again, when you go deep into it, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? Quite often people have the wrong goals. And the worst thing about a goal is not missing it, it's achieving it and not realising the satisfaction you thought you was going to get, because you just realise you've wasted your time chasing the wrong thing.
Go on.
Yeah, so that's basically the point, really, bringing back to it. I think you have to find your energy, and like for a lot of people, they go, well, how the heck am I going to do that? And on a very basic level, it's just finding time in your day to get back to basics and get back to yourself. Listen to yourself, hear yourself, without the constant bombardment going around you. And as you rightly said, maybe it's just going out for a walk, which is quite often why some pet lovers often are more relaxed. Might just because they get a chance once a day to take the dog for a walk. That could actually revolutionise people's lives. Just being able for 10, 15 minutes to go out for a walk without the TV going, without their family going, without their phone going, without anything going, and just walk. And that is as simple as it is. And I think for a lot of people, they just need to get that space where they can get back to basics and find their energy.
And experience their energy on a true level, rather than actually what we're kind of feel that we have, because we are bombarded by all these things. It deadens us. We start to protect ourselves from it all, and therefore we often don't experience our energy in many ways until we get ourselves out of those situations and can actually sit with it.
Oh, absolutely. Because everyone's experienced it at some point where they've sort of had a busy day, and then that last 10 minutes before they go to bed, they sort of sit there and they suddenly realise how they feel. Whereas for the entire day, they didn't have a chance to know how they feel because there was too much else going on.
It's just so true, isn't it, though, at the end of the day?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we put ourselves into more artificial environments to reduce those stresses, like going off and exercising in a gym and to classes which just continue, because we often run to those classes which are all regimented and they're all inside, so we don't actually have the energetics of the earth around us in the way that it should be. So it continues to dominate us and our fields, which we were talking about originally.
Yeah, absolutely. And you go to these places, it's full of other people who obviously operate in the same space, and they've got their own challenges. And in a weird place, the gym's quite a strange place, really, because you go there to feel better, but there's a whole load of people going there to feel better, implying they didn't feel that great when they walked in.
Yeah.
And they're bringing that to the gym, hoping that suddenly in the ether it's all going to magically disappear and they're going to walk out changed people. So there is that danger that you're associating with these people,
And then we're not actually achieving what we really think that we want to achieve, which is reducing our stress levels and escaping in many respects, because we put our iPods on and that's not escape. Many people will zone out, but it's not truly escape.
No, not at all, and the funny thing is, like, people put the gym on the list because it's a necessary evil sort of thing. That's what a lot of people's philosophy, isn't it? They've got to do it to stay in shape, and they've got to do this. When, if you've got an active lifestyle and you're moving on a regular basis, then there's no amount of gym work that can make up for that, if you know what I mean. Because if you go to the gym, you might go every day. You might go for an hour a day. But what could you possibly do for that hour, which replaces a day's activity where you're constantly moving around? Like if you was walking around as part of your job and moving and in flow, then that 1 hour's gym time that the office bod who didn't move for the entire day, was just sat there answering the phone, they can't replace that level of exercise and get it back and get in the same shape.
No.
Which is why some people go, I don't even go to the gym, I look lovely, And then some people go, well, I work my nuts off and I can't get what you've got. And it's just that philosophy. Like, people almost forget the basics. You're thinking, well, what gets, like, if you look at exercise, what is it about exercise that gets you fit? So let's look at it very crudely, the level that you move. And that's it. Like, but then people just think, well, I go to the gym and he didn't. And it's almost a paradigm shift to think that possibly they could still move more than you. You know that, like.
But also, it's that whole engagement with it, isn't it? Because it's not just the movement itself; it's actually the engagement and the putting. If you're putting passion and you're totally focused, and it comes back to what you were saying about intention. If you're putting that in place, then you're going to get a very different result.
Oh, absolutely, because everything's in flow. Like, energy's in flow, which is again going back to like why I love Eastern philosophy and the Eastern way, like the meridians and the chi, because it's got to be flowing. So when you do exercise for vitality, it needs to flow. When you think about a gym, for instance, I quite like lifting weights, but not because I think it's an amazing exercise. I just quite enjoy it, you know. But when you think about the actual process of lifting a weight, it's very mechanical. Like, there's no flow in it. It goes up and it goes down, like a machine piston almost, if you know what I mean. It goes up and it goes down, and it goes up and it goes down. Like, where's the energetic flow?
Yeah.
There isn't one, if you know what I mean. And then it doesn't really sort of translate to everyday life.
No.
You're thinking, I'm so glad I got stronger just going up and down in that plane of motion, because that's just revolutionised my life. Well, the thing is, it didn't, did it? Like, and then obviously there's, like, you know, some 75-year-old lady out in the park who does a bit of, you know, Tai Chi or something, and it's all in flow and it's moving, and she's got the health and the vitality, and she's living an amazing life. Because, but to the outsider looking on, they think, well, she can't be that hard, like she didn't get out of breath. But it's more about the flow of the exercise and the flow of the body, and being in tune with it, really.
Dean, this has been a fantastic interview with you, and I'd love to have you on again soon if possible. Now, just give us a little bit of background about how we can find you, how the audience can find you, and your website address, any numbers, those sorts of things.
Well, my coaching website is still warriorcoaching.co.uk. It needs to be updated, but it's still there, so it's easy for people to contact me through that website. And if anyone's interested in sort of, you know, the fundraising challenges, or even interested in pushing themselves and experiencing the challenge themselves, and then teamwarrior.co.uk is a website as well. It's totally not for profit, Team Warrior. It's all fundraising and charity based, so it's an easy way to get in contact with me. Absolutely
brilliant. Right. Well, I'm getting ready to hand over to Shaziz with the Tesla coils and his music. I have no idea what he's got going on today, but let's see if he's around on the chat box. Who's in the chat box? I don't even know if he's here at the moment, so hopefully he'll be taking over from me. But anyway, I'm Debbie Walker, and this has been Food for Thought, and I hope you've enjoyed today. Thank you very much. Bye.